for appearing again today. I have a question about the emergency backstop mechanism from Queensland Government, Department of Energy and Climate. It's implemented in Queensland. It allows the government to turn off people's solar panels at will. A lot of people in Queensland were shocked when the government reached into their homes and controlled their air conditioning units 170,000 times in the last 2 months. Now we're finding out the government can turn off their solar panels as well, people's solar panels. I don't understand why the panels on someone's house would have to be remotely cut off, even for self-consumption. As the regulator, do you have any data on how many of these generation signalling devices have been installed in Queensland under this emergency backstop mechanism, and how many are installed nationally?
So is your question about smart inverters then, Senator?
It's about smart meters that are cutting off air conditioning units and cutting off solar panels.
So it would be a smart inverter, controlled. So there is a backstop mechanism that's been put in place through the Energy and Climate Change Ministerial Council, which I don't know if the department wishes to comment on, but essentially it's to avoid situations of what they call minimum demand, Senator, so where you might have minimum demand problems. So it's where in system operation you might have so much solar in the system.
Middle of the day.
Middle of the day, that's right. SA is where it's been most acute. South Australia is where it's been most acute, where you might have so much that you actually can't keep a stable minimum generation load in place, and so solar is turned off during those emergency situations to ensure that you can keep that minimum stable generation load. I'm not aware of the figures that you've just quoted there, Senator, around the number of times it's been done in Queensland. So I'll just look at my colleague, Ms Jolly, or to Mr Duggan to see if they...
Yeah, I was going to ask Senator if you'd give us a sense of where those figures came from, because I hadn't heard them before.
I can get back to you on that. It was widely reported in the press last week.
It's not consistent with my understanding, Senator, so I think we'd need to see the figures.
Okay. Well, we'll get them to you. Under the National Electricity Rules, what remedy or compensation is available to a homeowner if their solar panels are turned off remotely and they suffer some kind of damage because of that?
So again, that's not an area of the AER's responsibility. I'm not sure whether there are compensation payments in place. I don't think there are there?
Yeah, I think, Senator, that would be a question that I suspect, and here I think having access to the information that you've got I think would help us out enormously. But to me, I think the direction of the question is more one that gets to AEMO's management of the grid, and so they, I suspect, would be operating that part of the system. And so if we can get the information from you, we'll endeavour to work with AEMO.
Doesn't the Australian Energy Regulator oversee the whole lot?
Sorry, yeah, but not in necessarily the way in which the system is operated, and that's a system operation question. We make sure people comply with the rules. One of the things I would say to you that the Australian Energy Regulator is doing, though, Senator, is working with the network companies to do what's called flexible export limits, and so this is to ensure that you have a greater opportunity to optimise the solar system across the whole grid so that we're not seeing, I guess, solar panels being turned off unnecessarily. Did you want to add anything?
No, I think that's basically right. I mean, at the moment, solar panels, as you mentioned, are turned off to preserve the stability of the grid. It's a fairly rigid arrangement. Perhaps a more flexible arrangements will allow people to export more frequently at times that are convenient to them, and that's something we're exploring with the various network businesses.
And one thing we do have,
You use the word acute to ensure stable minimum generation load. These things, solar and wind, have introduced a hell of a lot of management issues which add cost and risk to the system.
Well, I think they add costs and risk at times through the day, but they're also at times free. So I think from that perspective we see a lot of negative prices in South Australia and Queensland in particular through the middle of the day, which lowers overall average prices of the system. But there are, at other times in the day, costs obviously to manage the system. Ms Jolly's just reminded me we do have a report on Export Services Network Performance Report, which actually looks at how much how the networks are and how much solar energy is being exported into the grid. So that report might be useful to you too, Senator.
Okay, could you send us that?
Yeah.
So you may not be able to answer this question, but you're the overseer. How many air conditioners have been installed with remote demand management systems under the Peak Smart program in Queensland?
I wouldn't have access to that data, Senator.
Are you able to get it on notice?
I don't think we would have that as an agency. That sounds like a Queensland Government program.
But you're overseeing the national.
Well, we oversee the bits that are within the national electricity law and rules. State-based programs are usually done through state-based legislation.
So they can operate independently.
If the states have their own legislation, there will be elements of it that will operate through that.
So you're concerned that there seems to be increasing control over people's use of electricity and access to electricity?
In Queensland, it's been a very long time that there's been direct load control of air conditioners and pool pumps for more than 20 years. So I think from that perspective, it's not a new thing in Queensland, but it's always been a part of system operation in Queensland.
What about other states?
Is
it increasing?
We would have to look at the numbers. I don't have the numbers in front of me, Senator.
Could you get them on notice, please?
Would we have those numbers?
I'm not sure. They may come from the distributors who run those programs autonomously.
Do you know how many smart meters have been installed in Queensland?
I know probably how many smart meters there are in Queensland. I don't know in terms of the growth. I mean, we're at about, is it 47% in Queensland? Is that right?
Yeah.
We'd have to take that on notice.
47. Okay, if you could, please. 47% of households have smart meters.
We just looked at this last week, so I'm just trying to remember what the answer to that is, Senator. But I think that is we're heading into that territory in most of the jurisdictions now, up towards the high 40%.
Okay, is there anything in the national electricity rules that enshrines the right of a customer to refuse a smart meter? At the moment, many of the programs have opt-out clauses, but my question is whether there is actually anything in the electricity rules that will stop an electricity company if they decide to try to force someone to take a smart meter, make it mandatory.
I think I'll need to take that on notice as well, Senator.
Because it seems like there's increasing power over people's use of electricity. I'll just ask a few questions. You may not be able to answer these. It's about the emergency backstop mechanism media release that the government, or website. The government says that the emergency backstop mechanism is an important, there's a quote, is an important step in supporting Queensland's transition to a more coordinated electricity system. Is the electricity system becoming more coordinated, controlled?
Senator Roberts, I just wonder if, again, and we've just canvassed this a few times over the course of the day, it's very difficult for officials to answer questions about documents when we don't know the provenance of the document or the date it was published or have the document in front of us. Are you able to table that, perhaps provide us with a web link?
Sure. It's a website, last updated 12th of December 2023 from the Department of Energy and Climate and Queensland Government.
I see. So it's a Queensland Government.
Yes.
I'm not sure that the Commonwealth Government can answer questions about Queensland Government programs. I mean, the AER may have information for you, but there are limits on what we can discuss in this forum.
No, I understand that, Minister. I'm just looking at what the Queensland Government is saying about the more coordinated electricity system, and I thought that might come under the Australian Energy Regulator.
Look, I would probably say that an electricity system must be coordinated. It's always been coordinated because you have to have instantaneous meeting of supply and demand. That's why you have a system operator, to make sure that you've got generation resources available when people demand it. So that level of coordination is fundamental to ensuring that we can keep a stable voltage waveform in the system. I mean, the physics of it demands it. So to answer your question, it has always been a coordinated system and it will need to remain a coordinated system.
It says it's becoming more coordinated.
Senator Roberts, this notion of the national energy grid and then the role of the states, I think probably what we're tripping over here is that situation, that there is a national plan and then the states each have a set of responsibilities. How they then roll out those responsibilities are sometimes done in the state and not necessarily part of the purview of...
I understand that. I'm trying to find out whether or not you have any role over that or any information over that.
And I'm happy to try and answer your questions. That's not necessarily directly in my patch, but I'll help you however I can.
No, that's about all I have. We've already answered the last one I had.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.